If the storytelling sensibilities of Mike Mignola's decades-long Hellboy saga could be compared to any other form of art, it would be a mosaic. A massive image made up of many small moments, coming together to form something both intricate and cohesive. Not every piece is crucial, not every is as finely crafted as the rest, but each can be examined in detail to understand the bigger picture. Mignola's free reign at Dark Horse Comics to publish Hellboy how and when he pleased allowed the creator to move his story forward in stops and starts while also indulging in tangents far different from his major arcs. If a reader chose to do so, she or he could stick to the most important Hellboy stories, moving from his first encounter with Grigory Rasputin to his quitting the BPRD to his final battle with Nimue. But some of the funniest, strangest, and scariest moments in all of Mignola's work happen in the single-issue or micro-series side stories that often have nothing to do with the central Anum Un Rama-focused narrative of Hellboy. In these, we find the tragic world outside of Hellboy's own burden. A world filled with people who are, in their own personal ways, haunted by mistakes and inner evil, amplified by a supernatural world. While the focus changes, Hellboy remains our hero, our confidant, our source of levity, as demons, ghouls, and terrors beyond our imagination try to pull us down into destruction. His presence is what ties together this world of horrors that has its roots in cultures and folklore from around the world and across the centuries. How they fit together or contradict doesn't have to consistently make sense, because Hellboy himself is often encountering them for the first time. A trip through Hellboy's strange side adventures can reveal what these seemingly unimportant tangents tell us about how Mignola shaped his world, the increasingly complex character of Hellboy, and how one gothic horror comic can be used to blend so many different influences together to create something wholly original. Mignola's short Hellboy stories cut out the setup and often skip the reflection that come with full-length narratives and instead get right to the central idea. But they also flesh out two very different aspects of the Mignola-verse that are sometimes lacking in the central Hellboy stories. The everyday people that populate this world, and the vast pantheon of creatures, demons, and gods that are not directly involved with Hellboy's central journey. Almost all of these shorts take place between Hellboy's birth in 1944 and his first encounter with Grigory Rasputin in 1994, the focus of Hellboy's first comic, Seed of Destruction. The stories that come after are the focus of Mignola's main narrative, but that leaves 50 years of unaccounted for adventures freed from the cataclysmic struggles that define the rest of Hellboy's life. As a result, Mignola has the freedom to jump around in time and explore as many strange avenues and weird myths as he would like, at any pace that he needs. Hellboy is made up of all the stuff I like, and I like a lot of stuff, said Mignola. In fact, I've barely scratched the surface of folklore and mythology from around the world. While there are always human casualties in Hellboy stories, the human element of horror is played up even more in Mignola's shorts. Frequently, these humans are either unsuspecting everyday folk terrorized by evil, or foolish mortals who have dabbled in darkness for their own gain, only to get far more than what they bargained for. Stories like Goodbye Mr. Todd in 1999, King Vold in 2000, Dr. Karp's Experiment in 2003, They That Go Down to the Sea in Ships in 2007, In the Chapel of Moloch in 2008, and both Sullivan's Reward and The House of Sebek from Double Feature of Evil in 2010 are all slim stories where greedy men try to use the supernatural for their own gain, only to be quickly destroyed, even without the interference of Hellboy. The Whittier Legacy in 2010 follows in this tradition. Published in USA Today in hopes of attracting new readers, it tells of a man who believes he's entitled to something greater, driven mad and then destroyed by shrieking creatures from beyond in the most Lovecraftian of ways. It's played for laughs thanks to the dry reactions of his dead family members. Likewise, Into the Silent Sea in 2017 has its humans' undoing not caused by seeking to harness supernatural power, but by trying to dispel its power with modern knowledge. But the strangest of all these tales of humans touching the unknown is Buster Oakley Gets His Wish from 2011. Illustrated by Kevin Nolan, it's a complete comedy that features Hellboy attempting to solve a mystery of disappearing and bisected cows. Young Buster wishes to be transformed by the powers of hell, only to be abducted by aliens and turned into a cowman. Yes, there are aliens in the world of Hellboy. Mignola included them from the very start with a single page in Seed of Destruction. Still, their appearances are few and far between, making this comedic story even more surprising. It underlines the recurring theme that men who pursue their selfish desires in this supernatural world will only be greeted by evil. Justice wears strange and devilish faces in the Mignolaverse. There's also a vast array of folklore found in these stories. While the main Hellboy narrative is mostly influenced by 20th century occult tales, H.P. Lovecraft stories, and British folklore, the shorts are a massive grab bag of mythology. You never know what the influences will be, which makes these adventures unpredictable. Japanese folklore in Heads from 1998, Russian in the Baba Yaga, also from 1998, Romanian for the Varkolak in 1999, Malaysian for the Penanggalan in 2004, Roman myth for the Hydra and the Lion in 2006, Weird Tales recurring detective character Jules de Grandin in The Legend of Asmodeus and King Solomon in The Bride of Hell in 2009, and English folk tales for The Return of the Lambton Worm in 2018. These are slight stories filled with dry comedy, fast setups, winks to the reader, fast endings with either a quick resolution or an explanation that suddenly gives a reason for what just happened to the readers. Mignola's annual winter specials and Krampusnacht from 2017 carry on the spirits of fast one-offs, giving a chance for a wide variety of Hellboy-centered or Hellboy-adjacent stories with different teams of writers and artists taking a crack at Mignola's world. The Vampire of Prague from 2007 takes a similar approach. It was inspired by Mignola's first trip to Prague with director Guillermo del Toro while location scouting for Blade 2. While there, they found a ghoulish puppet that told the story of the gambler ghost of Prague. Lots of puppets in the later half of Hellboy comics. Mignola took this story and turned him into a vampire, with artist P. Craig Russell providing the visual storytelling. What starts as a moody, creeping piece soon becomes a farce, with Hellboy spooked by devil puppets, the vampire chasing after his own decapitated head, and a couple of accidentally drawn poker hands leading to victory. Here, Russell's more exaggerated, colorful art emphasizes Mignola's more comedic side. Like many of the earlier, slighter stories, it ends with Hellboy's laconic resignation. There you go. Regarding his fictional influences, Mignola said, "The beauty of adapting folk tales and fairy tale stuff is I've got traditional, old stories that I can pick and choose elements of, but I can also play really fast and loose, which I just wouldn't be terribly comfortable with if I was adapting a piece of literature. Planting these many different legends and religions in the world of Hellboy means that this fictional world will never comply with one simple lens on its beliefs. To quote William Shakespeare's Hamlet, 'There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy.'" Most of these shorts begin with Hellboy arriving on the scene of the incident, usually as an agent of the BPRD, and investigating reported disturbances. He mostly solves the problem with his fists in an old-fashioned noir hero sort of way, and in the process breaks a cycle of evil, which causes everything to go off balance and unravel, naturally leading to the destruction of the villain. But these short stories also let Mignola portray supernatural threats in a more sympathetic light than usual. His first short story not affiliated with the central narrative was The Wolves of St. August in 1994, and it's here that we catch our first glimpse of a sympathetic character, as the ghost of a little werewolf girl reveals how even the embodiments of horror in the Mignolaverse can be complex and tragic in their own rights. These shades of gray illustrate that Hellboy's story is more than simply man versus monsters, but instead is a world of rich history and complex beings, who are either sucked into dark lives through their own making or no fault of their own. A Christmas Underground from 1997 has a family slowly destroyed by an underground evil, redeemed at the last moment with belief, Christmas mass, and fire. The Ghoul from 2005 has Mignola stuff his dialogue with pre-existing poetry to create an off-kilter gothic contemplation of death. Being Human from 2011 details Roger the Homunculus's first field mission and contemplates what it means to be human, and all the ugliness that comes with it. The two-part The Sleeping and the Dead from 2010 and 2011 with artist Scott Hampton is a more ethereal, painterly take on Hellboy, and a quieter, more tragic European vampire tale, which is directly contrasted in the narrative against the raving, brutal vampires of Hellboy in Mexico. It's a story of family guilt kept alive and turned fatal by a vampire who victimizes two sisters, encapsulated by the younger one's confession. "I had no desire to be bad, to do bad things, but it came on me out of the dark. from all the bad things done to me. One of the great Hellboy shorts is The Troll Witch from 2004, a complete exploration of this sympathetic view of those who have been both harmed by and become part of Mignola's supernatural world. While it may start like a typical short, as Hellboy comes to town in search of a supernatural killer, he soon encounters an old troll witch who tells him a story. The story of her and her sister, one born beautiful and one born ugly, but both by supernatural means. The troll witch's anger toward true trolls led to her beloved sister's head being stolen, and her turned into a cow for the rest of her life. While the troll witch had killed them all with a wooden spoon, they've returned. So she gives Hellboy the spoon to keep the trolls out of their cave and turned into stone by the sun. It's a story of breaking the cycle of violence. The dead sister's human head grows flowers that will one day only cause beautiful children to be born, and the trolls will be destroyed without violence. But what is revenge after a life of sadness? No blow struck, no drop of blood spilled, and I wonder, how will you feel about that? Creatively, the greatest impact of Hellboy's short stories on Mignola himself was that they afforded the creator with a new way to express himself, allowing other artists to illustrate his stories. Hellboy is Mignola's baby, writing and drawing everything from Seed of Destruction, co-authored with John Byrne in 1994, through The Island in 2005. Macoma in 2006 was the first time he allowed another creator to bring the main Hellboy comic to life. But if the creator was going to trust anyone with his creation, it would be the famed, critically acclaimed, highly influential illustrator Richard Corben. This is a rare story of Hellboy in Africa, which adapts a tale from Andrew Lang's fairy books of the great African warrior Macoma, who roamed the continent and defeated both gods and demons until the end of the world. With the last of his strength, he slayed the great dragon, and the world began again, springing to life after his defeat. Hellboy hears this story from a mummy in the present, as Corben places him in the role of Macoma. It's hinted at that Hellboy will play the role of Macoma in the future, the great hero with a hammer in his hand, fighting like Thor in Ragnarok, only for the world to begin again after his noble sacrifice. Given what will come in later Hellboy and BPRD stories, the parallels become shockingly clear. Some things end, and some things go on forever. Corben has an affinity for horror, but unlike Mignola, he likes to paint his monsters, mayhem, and violence in vivid detail, using a massive amount of texture that borders on Seurat-like pointillism. The result is that Corben's take on the Mignola-verse is pockmarked, rough, and dry, full of dust and explosions of viscera. His horror may originate in the shadows, but will make itself well known as it tears you apart. That in-your-face terror is put to great use in The Crooked Man from 2008. One of the rare Hellboy stories set in America, this may be the most outright horror of any Hellboy story ever made. A man who made a deal with the devil years ago comes home to the Appalachians with Hellboy by his side. Their encounter with the Crooked Man is a battle that tests the limits of faith in ways that are much darker and scarier than the typical Hellboy story. Each Hellboy story has its influences from classic literature around the world, and Mignola will happily tell you where they originate. The Crooked Man owes a great deal to Manly Wade Wellman, 20th century pulp author who set the majority of his stories in the Appalachian Mountains. There's very little comfort found by the end of The Crooked Man. Life's rough, son. Rougher for some than others. You just do the best you can. Letting Corben take over the visuals to great acclaim let Mignola entrust other illustrators with his Hellboy stories, and as a result, the Hellboy series exploded in output. After the fallow period of 2002 through 2006, Hellboy stories started being published at a rapid clip, with artist Duncan Fegredo taking over artistic duties on the main Hellboy narrative with Darkness Calls. Rotating artists and new styles took the pressure off Mignola, who had become burned out. The result is that the Mignola-verse became a more inventive, strange, and unpredictable world, growing in sudden spurts and in weird new directions. Hellboy has always reflected where I was as far as my energy level and interests, said Mignola. As time went on, Mignola began to let his side stories breathe a little more. Specifically, the stories of Hellboy's time in Mexico have become their own small arc, spread across almost a decade of off-and-on comics. Unlike the rest of his shorts, these are intensely focused on Hellboy himself, and begin with Hellboy in Mexico, or A Drunken Blur, in 2010 with Corben. The comic was born from a random piece drawn by Mignola that he dated Palenque, Mexico, June 2nd, 1956. It was just for fun, but it clearly captured the creator's imagination and illustrates that the deep history and constantly expanding world of Hellboy is vibrant because of how strange, vast, and inherently unknowable it is. Hellboy in Mexico has luchadors blessed by God doing battle with monsters alongside a young Hellboy. There's Aztec vampires, a wrestling match to end it all, and Hellboy, the star of luchador films. But the loss of his friend Esteban, who is turned into a vampire that Hellboy is forced to kill, weighs heavily on the hero, causing him to go on a 5-month bender until he's found by the BPRD. Now, Hellboy's time in Mexico has become a subset of these strange adventures, and one that's focused on the young hero's guilt, as played out across a series of bright and colorful tragedies. The House of the Living Dead original graphic novel from 2011 with Richard Corben has Hellboy the Luchador fight the Mexican equivalent of Universal Monsters while trying to save a girl, but he fails, left only with more guilt that compounds the loss of Esteban. Hellboy vs. the Aztec Mummy, also from 2011, has him fight Quetzalcoatl, here shown to be an Ogdruhem spirit. In Hellboy Gets Married from 2013 and 2014, the hero marries a woman during his binge, only to find out that she's a vampire. He's forced to kill her and her company in battle, but the lingering sense that she'll be waiting for him in the afterlife remains. The Coffin Man 1 and 2 from 2014 and 2015 serve Hellboy with rare true defeats. Too drunk and too wild to know better while fighting a brujo who digs up and reanimates the dead. No solace, no comfort, just more loss. There's a lot more levity to be found in Hellboy vs. Lobster Johnson, The Ring of Death from 2019, which lets readers see one of the hero's luchador films, but otherwise, Mexico is a dark time. The burden felt by Hellboy in these Mexico-set stories is best summed up by the demon Astaroth at the end of The House of the Living Dead, who would go on to tempt Hellboy to become Anung Un Rama in later set comics. You choose to live a man's life. Live and suffer like a man. You can do that, but you will never be a man. You will never know the peace of the grave. You were born from hell, and bound for hell in the end. Astaroth's first temptation of Hellboy is detailed in The Midnight Circus from 2013, with regular collaborator Duncan Fegredo. In 1948, a young Hellboy sneaks out of his home at the BPRD and visits a mysterious midnight circus, which lures him into all sorts of strange visions inspired by Something Wicked This Way Comes and Pinocchio. When it's revealed that the circus is run by Astaroth and his demon niece Gamori, we see that Hellboy has been the subject of temptation his entire life, with these two characters soon playing major roles in the simultaneously publishing Hellboy in Hell. Fegredo, who had been responsible for the art of Hellboy's major stories before this, is inked by Dave Stewart, who switches between traditional inks and soft watercolors to differentiate the normal world and the mystical circus. Like the abandoned old movie theater that creates the strange wraparound setup of Double Feature of Evil in 2010, these many different short horror stories play off classical tropes and capture the essence of forgotten folk tales, like the Universal Monster movie posters that line the walls seen here. They sit waiting for us, telling their stories over and over, but filling us with lurking dread and a gothic terror whenever we want. As the Hellboy saga reached its climax, Mignola suddenly brought back characters and moments first seen in these comics, making his short adventures more important than ever. And in 2014, Mignola began the spin-off series Hellboy and the BPRD, a series of short volumes that began in the year 1952 and tracked a young Hellboy's time with the Bureau. While these interconnected miniseries have more of a through line than the scattershot short stories, they continue their legacy of artistic collaboration and work to completely fill in Hellboy's life. With the finale of BPRD The Devil You Know, the Mignolaverse has been given a definitive ending, but the short stories and series set in the past mean this enormous world can live on. These funny, sad, sweet, and scary stories remain crystallized in individual tales that we can return to over and over again. But when brought together, Hellboy's strange side adventures build a mosaic portrait of a terrifying and fascinating world, and the singular life of a hero whose many unknown years of adventuring begin to weigh heavily when seen in detail. Triumphs and tragedies would only multiply in the coming years for Hellboy.